Information Center has three different stations: radar, DRT, and OSC. Let's begin with the radar, which is the simplest of the three. The radar is meant to give you a quick overview of what's happening on the surface. If the radar picks up the U-boat, it will appear as a bright spot on the display. Our destroyer is located in the center, and the formation that you can see here is our convoy. In general, the most useful thing about the radar is that you can quickly determine the position against the convoy, as well as see what course to take in order to get where you want to be. As you can see here, we have a target with a particular bearing, so if we assume that it's going to attack this flank, then we can roughly determine that the initial intercept course should be this. Of course, we will need to correct it as we go, but in general, radar is an excellent tool, especially when used as a reference for your search plans and other maneuvers in relation to the convoy. In order to increase our situational awareness even further, we can use the DRT, the Dead Reckoning Tracer. The moving light represents our destroyer, and the protractor arm allows you to quickly convert the data from radar and sonar into a visual representation of both destroyer and enemy movement. You can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel, and you can scroll the camera around with the mouse wheel pressed. Click on the center of the moving light to mark the current destroyer position, and snap the 0 point of the ruler to that position. The ruler will now pivot around that position and allow you to mark the enemy position by checking bearing and distance. After 2 or more of such updates, you should have a good understanding of how the enemy is maneuvering, which will allow you to prepare for the attack much better. You can also snap the ruler to the last 2 enemy positions and draw a line to predict their further movement. You can do that by dragging the mouse cursor along the ruler with the left mouse button pressed. This way, you can also draw lines from each destroyer position. Remember that it is absolutely crucial to change the DRT scale from 1 to 1000 to 1 to 100 whenever the U-boat is 1000 yards away or closer. The close range is best used with slower speeds. If the plotting surface gets too crowded, remember that you can erase everything by clicking on the eraser icon. Last but not least, make sure to reposition the moving light whenever it gets close to the edge of the table. You can do that by clicking on it and dragging it along the table with the left mouse button pressed. Let us now see how to increase our awareness during the last stage of the attack, and to that end we will be using the Own Ship's Course and Enemy Bearing Projector, OSC for short. Let us assume that after analyzing the U-boat's maneuvers with the DRT, you have a mental picture of how you want to attack. You now need to maneuver in a way which will position you ahead of the U-boat's bow to allow you to attack with a depth charge barrage. The OSC projector will facilitate that final maneuvering part for you by displaying the ship's silhouette together with enemy bearing. The controls for the OSC projector are very similar to the DRT, as you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out and keep the mouse wheel pressed to scroll the camera around. You can also erase everything if you need to by clicking on the eraser button. The interesting thing about the OSC projector is that it does not have a fixed scale, and you can calculate distances in a way that suits you best. I personally recommend taking each dotted ring as 100 yards and using the bearing rings as a reference for 600 yards. However, you can calculate distances here in any way that is convenient for you, so if you decide to treat each ring as 1000 yards, then it is fine, as long as it works for you. As you might have noticed, the OSC projector is somewhat similar to the bearing indicator on the bridge, but its advantage is that it allows you to actually track the contact minute by minute and paint an overall picture of enemy maneuvers just before the attack. Once you begin closing in, it is advisable to follow the target and adjust your turns so that, in the end, you arrive before the U-boat's bow just in time to deliver a deadly barrage of depth charges. The final stage of the attack will probably require you to switch to the bridge every once in a while to adjust your turns, and then finally to the sonar room, where you will be able to determine the optimal time to fire. One piece of advice that you can try out is to attempt to close in on the U-boat while keeping the bearing steady. If you manage to find a course that allows you to close in with little to no bearing drift, it means that you are approaching the target exactly the way you should. If, on the other hand, you get a strong bearing drift, it means that the U-boat is passing by quickly, which usually means that your approach is less than optimal. This concludes the presentation of combat in Destroyer.